Assalamu alaikum. First, I want to say that this is my first time in Texas. Alhamdulillah. And I feel so welcomed with such a warm reception. I actually left a blizzard in DC, so everyone back home is under 2 feet of snow, and all we have here is sunshine and warmth. So alhamdulillah. Brothers and sisters, I'm going to talk to you twice tonight. My initial remarks now are briefer, and then I'm going to expand on these points later in the evening. What I really want to discuss, though, is this concept of justice. When I was asked to speak at this forum, the reason for me that it was an immediate yes is because this is an organization that exists as an investment in justice. I work in an organization that works on research, and I think that's a worthy cause. But I can't think of a more urgent need today than the need of justice. So when you're thinking about what you want to support, what you want to invest your time, your resources in, think about this central concept of justice. When someone is falsely accused, or falsely arrested, or falsely fired from their job, for no other reason than because of what they believe, not only is that a violation of justice, but it is a threat to everything that this country is supposed to be about. When we invest in justice, we are not only protecting American Muslims or Muslims in general. I actually believe that this effort and this organization will go down in history, especially at this time, as an institution that was protecting American democracy.
Right.
Because these kinds of cases and this kind of rhetoric that makes these kinds of cases possible is not just a threat to one group. This is really a fact, and I will tell you more about why I say that. The kinds of things that we are trying to defend here tonight are a threat to every single American because they violate the very foundation of democracy. The right to a fair trial, the right to actually get justice, is at the core of what this country is supposed to be about. And what the Muslim Legal Fund of America does is it invests in this idea. And it doesn't just do it locally. It's in fact the only organization that does this on a national level. One of my principles in anything I do is to avoid duplication of good work. When I hear about an organization that's doing something exactly like another organization, I beg them to just work together because it's a waste of our resources when we duplicate good work. In my own research, before I even start a project, I actually survey the country to find out who else is working in this space. I have a conversation with them over the phone to make sure that if we do a project, that it's not an overlap. We are filling a gap because there is too much of a need in our community and too few resources to waste time and money. And what is so heartening about this organization is that it is so unique. It fills a very important niche. Because I asked this question, how are you different from the other organizations that seem to be doing similar work? And I got a great answer. There has been this strategic thought process about how to fill a gap, not duplicate good work, because we just don't have time to be competing against each other. Our competition is injustice. That's what we're against. We're not against each other. We have no time for anything but fierce mutual support and love amongst each other at this time. And what this organization does is it fills an important gap. The other thing that inspires me about the Muslim Legal Fund of America is their dedication to excellence. When I heard about the kind of people and the caliber of the defense that they have brought on, the professionals that they have brought on for their legal center, which you'll hear more about, I was floored. Because when you're doing God's work, you have to find the best and the brightest to partner with. It can't just be mediocre work. So when you invest in justice, invest with people who are unique in what they do, not duplicating good work, and have found the best ways to help the community and have invested in that top caliber work. Because then you know what you are investing in, what you are putting your hard-earned resources in is going exactly to where it should go. It's helping the right people in the right way with the best resources possible. So I hope that today we will end this gathering in a way where we are all successful. Because I believe this is really, truly an opportunity to invest in both excellence and in justice. And I look forward to talking to you again in just a few minutes. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. I actually just want to start by saying takbir. What I just witnessed was really inspirational. So give yourselves a hand and glorify God for what just happened. MashaAllah. Brothers and sisters, I wish that I was here with you, addressing you under better circumstances. But we are facing a time of great anxiety and great uncertainty. We are at a point in our history as a community and as a country where there is great danger. Right now, we have a public where a slight majority believes that the values of Islam and the values of the United States are incompatible. We have a situation where the least favorably viewed community in America are Muslims, just according to opinion polls. We have a situation where Islamic centers around the country have been targeted and attacked. Everything from firebombs to graffiti. We have a situation where our children are many times being bullied in school, being called terrorists, members of ISIS, for no other reason than because of the way they look, what their names are, and what they believe. We have a situation where the FBI's latest report on hate crimes found that every other group, hate crimes against every other group of people, has actually gone down, alhamdulillah, except for one group, where the numbers have only come up, and those are Muslims. The only group in America where hate crimes against this group have gone up instead of down are Muslims. In fact, in just the past 2 months, documented hate crimes against Muslims has skyrocketed. So I'm not here to tell you that everything's okay. because everything is not okay. What I am here to tell you, though, is that this is not the story of helpless victims who are trying to survive. That's not our story. That cannot be how we see ourselves. The message that I want to share with you today is the role that you all have to play as moral leaders in getting our country out of this mess. Because as much as this problem of Islamophobia and bigotry feels like our problem, and as much as we may feel under siege and isolated, that's the furthest thing from the truth. This issue of Islamophobia and bigotry is a threat to every single American. And I'm going to make a case for that. This isn't just rhetoric. It's not just theory. And then I'm going to suggest to you 5 things that I think we must do as moral leaders to lead the way to a better future for our children. While we may be its most visible victims, we are not its only victims. What the Muslim community is today, in today's climate, in this juncture in our history, are canaries in the coal mine. Now, those of you who might be familiar with what this expression means know that miners use canaries when they're in a mine to find out when the air in the mine has become toxic. The way they use the canary is the first to feel it. The canary will pass out before anyone else realizes that the air is now deadly. The air is toxic. And so that canary is the first to feel the toxic air and saves the lives of everyone else, because then they can fix the problem by leaving. And in this juncture in our history, our community is like that canary. We are the first to feel it, but this toxic air is killing everybody. It's not just us. In one study that my organization came out with about a year ago, we found that the same lawmakers that go after Muslims with things like anti-Sharia legislation, anti-foreign law legislation, are proposing laws that curtail the rights of Blacks and Latinos, women, labor movement members, immigrants, and many others. There's an 80% overlap between lawmakers that go after Muslims and those who go after, and those same people go after these other groups. And I'll tell you why. This is not sort of from nowhere. There is a historical demographic shift happening in our country right now. Actually, it started to be noticed with the election of President Obama. The election of President Obama was supposed to usher in a new era in America, so-called post-racial America, where race was a thing of the past, where we were past that. We had evolved beyond race. But there were some people who weren't so good with that. They weren't liking that too much. And it was actually with the election of Barack Obama that this movement started to pick up steam. A movement that is afraid of losing its privilege. So as far back as 2013, the Southern Poverty Law Center documented a sharp increase in white supremacists and hate groups. In fact, at that time, it documented a 300% increase in hate groups specifically against Muslims, as far back as 2013. So this demographic shift that by the year 2050, there's actually our country, and sometimes people even say it's going to be before that, is going to be majority minority, majority non-white. This demographic shift, which started to show its promise and its possibilities with the election of Barack Obama, okay? He's a president who was elected. He's the president of the United States. And the majority of white males voted for someone else. So we have a president that, the majority race did not vote for. And some people are very nervous about this possibility. So it started with this political turn that a movement, a certain demographic, it's not everybody, of course, but a certain segment of our population started to mobilize against this impending threat. And what has happened today in our current election is very simple. Anyone who's gone to business school knows what's happening. When people blame Donald Trump for the hate, they're getting it backwards. He's a businessman, and he does market analysis. And he found a segment of the market that wasn't being serviced. They wanted a certain kind of candidate with a certain kind of message, and no one was quite meeting that niche. And so he gave them a product he created a product for that market, and that product is called Donald Trump presidential candidate. He's not creating that market. He may be feeding it, emboldening it. He's catering to it. He's pandering to it. So the problem is much bigger than one individual or one presidential candidate. I think it's important that we understand what we're actually up against. This is about a demographic shift, and it's about an economy, especially in actually lower paid workers, where effectively people's income has not gone up in 15 years. So there is economic pressure and a demographic shift that people are afraid of, and he is banking on this. He is exploiting this fear and this sense of insecurity. Now, who is it affecting? I just explained this idea of lawmakers going after not just Muslims, because it's not just us. It's a fear of this loss of privilege. So this is something that's impacting so many more people. But I'm also going to make the case that it's not just marginalized communities that should be afraid and should be working diligently against this fear-mongering. I want to make the case to you that it is something every single American who cares about democracy should care about, because freedom is not just freedom from physical coercion or even political disenfranchisement. The most precious freedom we have is the ability to think freely. And when we are manipulated emotionally to do something, to think a certain way, then we're not free. We are not free. Every single one of us, whoever we are, whatever background we are not free when we are fed fear 24 hours a day. In one study of media in the United States by an independent firm, it found that 80% of media content on Muslims and Islam in the United States, this is news now, not editorials or, Sean Hannity. I'm talking about straight up news that's supposed to be neutral. 80% of it is negative. Now, just as a reference so you understand how alarming this is, when they did the same analysis on portrayals of North Korea, a designated terrorist state that has openly threatened the United States, 71% of coverage of North Korea was negative. Okay? So you have a community that is more negatively portrayed than North Korea, and that's our community. When people are fed fear 24 hours a day, Three things happen. According to neuroscience research, this is what fear does to the human mind, to the way we think. It makes us accepting of three things. It makes us more accepting of conformity, authoritarianism, and prejudice. That is the neurological impact of fear. Now, when you think of these three things, what impact do these three things have on a functioning democracy? When Thomas Jefferson said a prerequisite for a democracy is a well-informed citizenry, he's the one that mandated public education because he said without it, we couldn't have a democracy. Because if people don't understand what's happening, if they're not making a well-informed decision about who they're voting for, democracy doesn't work. When you're feeding your citizens fear 24 hours a day, manipulating their mind, it is literally mind control where you're actually eroding the prerequisites of democracy. You are eroding the foundation of democracy. So Islamophobia is not a threat to Muslims. It's not just a threat to people of color. It's a threat to every single American who cares about this democracy. So brothers and sisters, despite the seriousness of the problem, despite the increase in attacks, in hate crimes, in bullying, in rhetoric that would not be acceptable for any other community, my message to you is we are not victims trying to survive. We have a historical role to play as moral leaders, saving our community and our country from this grave danger.
That's right.
We are not here to be petty, and we're not here to do something small. We were put on this earth with a much nobler and a much greater cause than that, than simply to survive. We are here to save our country, to save our community from a cancer that isn't going to stop when it kills one community. Because it's not just going after Muslims. This cancer is killing everything that this country is supposed to be about. So what is our role? What can we do to lead this moral movement for change? And I would recommend 5 things. The first thing that we all must do is to liberate our minds, is to start with ourselves, to change our mindset from feeling like an embattled, victimized community. And remember, I'm not denying the problems, but to see ourselves as simply on the front lines of a battle for the soul of American democracy. You and I have a very serious trust that we have accepted by being followers of a man who stood for justice, by submitting to God who established justice. We just don't, we don't have any other choice but to take up this mission. So you are not victims. This message is one of empowerment, not of victimization. You have to liberate your mind and change your mindset from feeling attacked to feeling like it's up to you to save everyone, including those who are attacking you, from this cancer, from this threat of bigotry and Islamophobia. We also liberate our minds by challenging not only the answers, but the questions. I ask questions for a living, right? I do research on public opinion and on social realities in the American Muslim community. And what you learn when you do research is that any question you ask has a whole host of assumptions behind it. There is no sort of neutral question. Definitely lawyers know that. So when you're asked certain questions, you have to take a step back and think, what are the assumptions behind this question? And if the assumptions behind that question are unfair, we have to challenge the question. Now, we can and have, God knows we have, condemned terrorism. We've condemned terrorism more than any other community in the history of the universe. Alhamdulillah. If we had a penny for every time we've condemned terrorism, we wouldn't need any fundraisers. And yet, we're still being asked, hey, what's up with you not condemning terrorism? And so, at some point, we have to ask, what is the paradigm behind that question? And I'm gonna share with you what I think that paradigm is, essentially. And I'm really actually kind of gratified because I had this theory that this was the paradigm, and then some politicians were so explicit as to actually state it explicitly rather than just implicitly, imply it. So here's what I think. Here's the paradigm behind why, the condemning terrorism demands. America is a body. It's like a human body, America, the country of America. And one day, it discovered a tumor in that body. And any of you who've had that, that experience of finding a lump in some part of your body, and you go to the doctor and they say, well, we're not really sure. Could be benign, in which case we're going to keep it under surveillance, or could be malignant, in which case we have to extract it. And so that's the debate. Here's a lump. What do we do? What do we do with this tumor? Is it benign or is it malignant? And we have sort of bought into the question because we feel so under attack, and we're like, no, we're really benign. We're a benign, we are not going to hurt anybody. We're completely harmless, and we condemn terrorism. It's the right. Of course, it's true. We are harmless, but we're answering the wrong question. And then we have other people who are like, you know what? I think this tumor is malignant. And actually, I'm one of those doctors who thinks, just in case, let's get rid of it. And that's the kind of school of thought people like Trump come from. The problem, though, with the entire thing is that the American Muslim community is not a tumor at all. We are a vital organ to the body of America. And when we answer the wrong question, we reaffirm and re-entrench the wrong paradigm. So we have to start liberating our minds by seeing through these paradigms and equipping our children to deconstruct these mental models that are built on falsehood. So that's the first thing, is we have to liberate our minds. The second is we have to educate. We have to educate others. We have to educate ourselves about our own faith. And then we have to educate others not only by speaking to them, lecturing them, making movies about them, or writing research projects about them, which is what I do, but rather living our faith. So we have to educate people, and we have to reach out to them, and we have to live our faith. And we don't have to be afraid to say, I am this way because I'm a Muslim. If you think that I'm a decent, honest human being, once you've established a relationship, explain where these values come from. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, and there's nothing to be ashamed of. Educate your friends, your neighbors. Help them understand who you are. And I'll tell you something really interesting that I discovered in my research is, the idea usually is if you know someone from a community, then you're less likely to be prejudiced against that community, right? And that's actually true. But it's true, but it's limited. In the case of Muslims, a much more powerful driver of removing prejudice, more powerful than knowing a Muslim, is understanding Islam. Way more powerful than knowing a Muslim. Because you can have a Muslim friend. I mean, we all know that Donald Trump has many Muslim friends, right? You can have a Muslim friend and still be a bigot. It's possible, we've seen that happen. But when you understand the faith itself, that's what actually truly gives you and immunizes you against the bigoted messages. Because you have a population of people that themselves admit they know virtually nothing about Islam. About 80% say they know nothing about Islam. Consuming a media that is 80% negative. And then we wonder why there's Islamophobia. My entire conclusion is I'm wondering why there isn't more of it. The American people are really amazingly immune to bigotry because as bad as all of that is, there's only as much bigotry as we see now. Where you have situations, right here in Irving, I heard this beautiful story where that whole 20 mosque movement of armed, in some cases armed protests, some cases they weren't armed, were planning on rallies against Muslim centers. That in the case of here in Texas and in other places, the protesters that showed up were, you could count on one hand, and those that came from the neighborhood to support the Muslims were in the thousands. I had that experience in my own community, where the week of 9/11, that week, that first Friday after that horrific Tuesday of the attacks, a full half of the congregation in the mosque were people of other faiths who came not to yell at us, accuse us, suspect us, but to show solidarity with us. So the American people, despite not knowing very much about Islam by their own admission, and the kind of media that is forced down their throat, are surprisingly not bigoted. The question is why should not be why there's Islamophobia, but why there isn't more of it considering this. So continue to outreach and continue to educate, continue to build relationships. They really do matter. They really do make a difference. And we've seen it time and again. The third thing, though, in addition to education, outreach, relationship building, is we need to hold people accountable. It's not either or. It's not outreach and education and beautiful speech or holding people accountable. We have to do both. When people abuse their authority, we have to hold them accountable. When a teacher is abusive to our children, that school and that school system should be held accountable. That's the only way things change. When I worked in the corporate world for more than 15 years, and every single company I've ever worked in had anti-harassment training. Where do you think this anti-harassment training comes from? The goodwill of the corporate world that just wants to make sure women are not harassed in work? No, it was because of a lawsuit, many, many lawsuits. And that's how things change. That's how we make safer workplaces. That's how we make life safer for our children. So I don't think there's any contradiction between building relationships with other communities and holding violators accountable. Those things are both about justice. The fourth thing I think we absolutely have to do, and we are in some cases great at it, and some cases we do have to do much better, is we need to build coalitions. We need to build coalitions with other communities that are being impacted. Because here's the thing, brothers and sisters. We might feel like we're separate. We might feel that we don't have anything in common with these other communities that are being targeted. But guess who thinks we're very much the same? Those attacking us. Those same lawmakers going after us are going after other marginalized communities, and yet we're not working together. They're united against us, but we're not united back just to defend ourselves. We have to build coalitions with other communities in the United States. We don't even have a choice. And we also have to see that there is a common source of these problems. When you look at the alarming, and this is actually not a new trend, it's simply something we've finally started to pay attention to. The alarming frequency by which Black people are being shot by law enforcement or vigilantes acting as law enforcement in the United States, with, in many cases, being acquitted with impunity. And we think that that phenomena is so different from the same phenomena where Muslims are being targeted for false lawsuits and false allegations. We think those two things have nothing to do with each other. We don't understand that this is coming from the exact same source, which is bigotry being institutionalized. This is the same problem manifesting in different ways. This is the same cancer with just tiny little differences in its symptoms. You know what's interesting is that there's actually documented rise in hate crimes since the rhetoric of Donald Trump has really increased against Muslims and against Latinos. Because those are the groups that are being targeted. And in fact, in the beginning of this campaign season, it was Latinos first. They were the first to be targeted. And then it was our turn. We came next. And we, again, see no connection. We're not working together enough. I cannot emphasize, if there's one thing that you remember from this talk, is the importance of building coalitions and seeing these manifestations of institutionalized bigotry as coming from the same source. Because empirically, not just theoretically, empirically they are from the exact same disease. So build coalitions. And finally, the fifth thing we have to do is we have to leave a legacy of compassion. Now, you've heard about reducing your carbon footprint, especially in the great state of Texas. We have to increase our compassion footprint, brothers and sisters. Because we profess to follow a man who was described by God as a rahmah to all the worlds. A rahmah. Translated in a lot of ways, some of which is mercy, compassion, unconditional love, comes from the root rahim, the womb. The womb of a mother nurtures and gives even at her own demise. If a mother does not have enough nutrients, the baby will get the nutrients and she will lose them. That's how the womb works. It's not only unconditional, but it's selfless love and nurturing and giving without expecting anything back. Anyone here who's a mother knows you give and you don't expect back anything from your children. So when we think of this concept of ar-Rahmah to all the worlds, how are we manifesting this as inheritors of this great trust of submitting to God and following his Prophet, alayhi salatu wassalam? This man, the messenger of God, peace and blessing be upon him, could have been described in so many ways because he was incredibly brave. Yet that's not how he was described in this central and often quoted ayah in the Quran. He was a great teacher, yet he wasn't called a teacher to all the worlds. He was a wise and knowledgeable man, and yet that wasn't the description here. He is described as a mercy to all the worlds. And as followers of this man, how are we leaving a legacy? How are we living this reality? Now, I think many of us are doing it. And I mean that on an individual basis, in our family life, in our communities, and in our institutions. I think the Muslim Legal Fund is a mercy to all the worlds. I think this is an institution, and all of you are here to support it, that is manifesting this description. I travel around the country and I see free health clinics that Muslims have set up, have brought doctors in who provide free health care to people who can't afford it. That's a manifestation of being a rahmah to all the world. In fact, the network of free health clinics is called the Compassion Network, living out this concept. There are Muslim institutions that are offering formerly incarcerated men and women job training so that they can lead a righteous life. There is so much happening that you would be proud of. But there isn't enough information, there isn't enough awareness of this existing compassion that we are living. And so I'm not here to say that it's not happening. I'm saying we need to understand and then expand. Build on the good work that is already happening. Even as individuals, make that your pledge for this year. To be a living manifestation, a living example of this concept. Because we are not going to drive out hate with more hate. The only thing that can drive out darkness is light, not a different kind of darkness. So don't go to this struggle against bigotry with anger in your heart. Go to it with compassion. Do it because you love God and His messenger and humanity. Do it because you love freedom and democracy. And do it because you love Islam. Thank you.